Reports now estimate that more than 2,000 Iranians have been killed by the regime over the past few days, but the protests aren't stopping. They're continuing to spread across the country. Now, as a warning, we have some graphic footage that I'm going to show today, but these are clips that I think are important to share as they show Iranian citizens scouring body bags searching for their loved ones. And meanwhile, President Trump has been briefed on options for the United States to assist the Iranian protesters, including the possibility of direct military action. Now, starting out with a report from Iran International with footage showing south of Tehran, several dead bodies in body bags. They say, quote, according to eyewitness accounts accompanying these videos, dozens of bodies were visible at the site with additional bodies reportedly located in another nearby industrial shed. They say 2 eyewitnesses in search of their loved ones told Iran International they saw more than 400 bodies there. They say this points to an unfolding mass killing that is not confined to a limited number of cities. Iran International says the most conservative estimates indicate that at least 2,000 people have been killed over the past 48 hours. Now, I want to stress the numbers here are very, very hard to dial in. In fact, just earlier today, human rights activists in Iran reported 466 deaths, but the internet is shut down and there's very little information actually making its way out. In fact, that's kind of the goal of the Iranian regime right now. What we're seeing from those in charge in Iran is labeling the protesters as terrorists, vandals, and domestic threats, which is widely viewed as a precursor or an excuse for a violent crackdown on the citizenry. Any media that does manage to make its way out of Iran is immediately labeled as fake or manufactured and not legitimately what is happening on the streets of Iran. In fact, as this internet shutdown has been occurring and limited footage has been coming out, albeit footage showing widespread protests across the country, Iranian state media has instead shared clips of their reporters driving the streets of these cities to say, hey, everything is okay. Nothing going on at all. Everybody go back home. In fact, they're promoting on Monday a pro-regime protest, counter-protester protest, if you will, in Tehran. But despite the regime's best efforts, there is still reporting coming out giving us an idea of what is actually happening as the Iranian people rise up. We have a note from the Mamlakate, my apologies in the pronunciation there. It's a community of volunteer citizen journalists quoted a citizen in the Narmak neighborhood of Tehran saying, quote, the internet is completely shut off. Texts are disrupted both through receiving and sending, and phones are cut off for hours of the day. Thursday was the most glorious day of my life. Millions of people were on the streets of Tehran, and many of them had come with families and kids. Suddenly, everyone started moving towards the Haftaj Square to take over the police station. Unfortunately, right before my eyes, 7 or 8 people were shot at, and a massive massacre happened that night. But unfortunately, no news of it got out. They slaughtered people with machine gun fire, and the death and the injury toll is utterly horrifying. The morning after, I went out to see what the neighborhood and city looked like, and I saw all of the streets covered in blood. They were washing the blood off the asphalt with high-pressure power after massacring them. And this is, again, a note that we are getting very, very little information about what is happening. There's more reports of this, of people saying that they're in protests where automatic weapons are opened up by regime forces against the protesters. My gut says that as more information comes out, we're going to find out that these are not isolated incidents, but widespread violence against the citizenry by the Iranian regime. That one reporter stressed, quote, we need outside help. Please amplify our voices. Since Thursday night, every night you can still hear chants and gatherings from all over the area and the streets, and the people's presence continues. But every night there's also the sound of machine gun fire, and the Islamic Republic is massacring us in complete isolation. Now, as they ask for external help, they largely are looking to the United States, and it's understandable that they might see some optimism, as just yesterday, President Trump posted, quote, Iran is looking at freedom, perhaps like never before. The USA stands ready to help. And just a few hours ago, we got reporting from Barack Ravid at Axios that President Trump has now been briefed on the options that he can take to assist the protesters in Iran. Quote, all options are on the table for President Trump, but no decision has yet been made, a U.S. official said. They added that the discussions had included military strikes, but most of the options presented to the president at this stage are not kinetic. They say while U.S. military strikes against Iranian regime targets are among the options being discussed, many inside the Trump administration think major kinetic action at this stage would undermine the protests. More on that here in a moment from Democratic lawmaker Mark Warner. They say a U.S. official and a senior Israeli official both said that there are some signs of dissent within the Iranian security forces, but it's unclear how widespread it is, and none of the officials said the regime appeared in danger of imminent collapse. So again, very mixed signals between the limited information we're getting from the protesters and the very clearly distorted picture we're getting from the Iranian regime. Turning to an assessment of what the U.S. intervention might actually look like, we have a clip here from Benem Ben Taleblu, the Iran program director at Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Let's give that a quick listen.
What does intervention look like with President Trump?
It depends a great deal. President Trump covets flexibility. He covets creating a sense of uncertainty, both in terms of the minds of the partners of the U.S. as well as the adversaries of the U.S. I don't think the president would start immediately with kinetic, although he certainly does have that option, particularly post-12-day war. You know, I've just had a piece with a colleague at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies in the Wall Street Journal today talking about replicating the Venezuela model, not with regime change militarily at the top, but with taking the tankers. If the president is looking to level the playing field between the state and the street, he needs to pull the plug out of the repression apparatus, and that means going after all of the Iranian tankers that sell oil to China, just like he's been doing with Venezuelan tankers that have been selling oil to China.
Yeah. That kind of gives you an idea of the non-kinetic options, especially the seizure of Iranian ships. Again, that very well might be in the cards. We've seen President Trump find success with that recently. I mean, I think just the other day we seized even more ships off the coast of Venezuela. We took a Russian flag tanker about a week ago, and there's been no significant international outcry. That does, if you're President Trump, looks like something he has in his cards that he can do at relatively low risk. So would not be shocked to see the United States start to seize tankers here in the coming days. Now, it's not everybody rallying behind the take immediate action camp here. In fact, CNN said, quote, "There are concerns inside the administration that military strikes could backfire and undermine the protests. The concerns," the official said, "are that the strikes could have the unintended effect of rallying the Iranian people to support the government or lead Iran to retaliate with military force on its own." Two different concerns there. We're going to break them both down here in a second. But no doubt, if the U.S. does act with military force, we would become military targets for Iran. That should not be a shock to anybody. The Associated Press reported that Iran is doubling down on this as well, with their parliament speaker on Sunday warning that the U.S. military and Israel will be legitimate targets if America strikes the Islamic Republic. I mean, yes, right? If we take military action against somebody, it is entirely understandable that they might try to take military action in response. Now, some of the pushback we're starting to see in government against really any sort of action, from my read on it, is coming here on the Sunday news shows from Senator Mark Warren, worried again that any sort of strike might help unite the Iranian people behind the regime.
Well, the Iranian regime is awful, and I stand with the Iranian people. But what I'm worried about is if we take a kinetic strike, does that actually unite the Iranian people in a way that the regime has not been able to? I know this is history, but the last time we intervened in Iran in a major way was 1953, when the CIA overthrew the Iranian regime to protect Iranian oil for the West. Many historians would argue that led to the Ayatollah. I think we can put outside pressure. I think rallying the rest of the world, but taking a kinetic strike, unless there is a plan on what next.
Now, I disagree with the senator there. I am on board that there needs to be some sort of plan, and we shouldn't just throw a few bombers overhead, hit a couple targets in Iran, and hope that actually does something. But we do have a lot of capabilities in our toolbox, to include cyber, and of course the kinetic option of going after Basij or IRGC facilities, especially those that are focused on tamping down the protests violently, as we've seen in recent days. So going after those, it's hard to imagine that. I mean, we saw this during the 12-day war. The Iranian people did not rally behind the regime. If anything, the regime was at that point also kind of on the brink of collapse and scurrying to try to maintain control over the population. So the idea that right now, as the Iranian regime is opening fire and massacring their own citizens in the streets, that killing some of those officials would unite the Iranian people, I think is a poor assessment there by the senator. Now, even if the United States does take some sort of deliberate action here in the next couple of days to try to help the protesters, there's still a lot that needs to be done on the ground. We have a comment here from Nadav Eyal. My apologies in the pronunciation there. He's a columnist at Israeli outlet Ynet, throwing a little cold water on all of this, saying, quote, "The tremendous courage of the Iranians is an inspiration to all who cherish liberty, but it's not enough on its own." And we have seen in recent days a lot of folks refer to this as not protest, but a revolution. And that is kind of being echoed by the Iranian regime as they are labeling these people as terrorists. The head of the military said that they are at war. These are foreign actors coming in designed to disrupt and overthrow the state. But Eyal says here, there's a lot more work still to be done. Quote, "Reports of mass shootings of protesters by Iranian suppression forces are not a good sign for the revolution. What we want to hear is refusals by security forces and they're joining in. Weakness is a fundamental and necessary matter." So it's a good point. We haven't seen any government forces kind of turning or laying down their arms or walking away from their posts. So far, everything that's come out, not just from the government, but from the protesters themselves, are that government forces are standing their ground. He says revolutions don't happen because the people are in the streets, but because revolutionaries know how to take the power in the streets and convert it into governance. Who are the revolutionaries? Now, it's early. We're just about a week into this, and it's dangerous, no doubt, for any one person to stand up or any group to stand up and say, we are the ones leading this. In fact, Iran in recent days has really been promoting that they have been cracking down, arresting any leaders of these protest movements. Now, the people that they arrest, they don't show their faces. Their backs are to the camera, and they show them, holding pocket knives and sometimes small arms. So it's hard to tell exactly if that was the actual leader of some sort of movement, but that is needed. This transition from anger in the streets to taking over government and actually running the government, there has to be some sort of symbol there. And right now we have the crown prince in exile who's outside of Iran that a lot of people inside of Iran are looking to, but it's a long ways between where he is today and effectively stepping in as some sort of actual government to stand up to or replace the Islamic regime. He says the test is a triangle, a combination of masses in the streets, cracking of the regime and its supporters' determination to shoot protesters, and exceptional organizational ability to take over the government itself. The last element requires organization and a plan. And this is something that, if we had the stomach to do it, you would have to think the United States, Israel, and maybe others could assist with. Actual regime transition, maybe, is a good way to put it, right? Is that a softer way of saying regime change? If the people rise up and say, we're done with the Islamic regime, we're done with the Ayatollah, is there a way for us to step in and assist in some way, shape, or form that transition to their next form of government, whatever that might be, a representative form of government for the average Iranian citizen? Now, going back to Benem bin Taleblu again of FDD, talking about what comes next, he lays out some scenarios and what still needs to be done for any sort of major transition to happen here.
What do you see potentially, if this is the edge of the cliff moment, what happens next?
Well, all eyes should be on several factors. The first, of course, is the security forces. The Islamic Republic has a cocktail of security forces, some volunteer, some formal elements of the state. It has thrown different elements of these security forces, whether they're vigilantes, whether they're police, whether they're the Basij, whether they're the IRGC, at different groups of the protesters at different times and in different ratios. Sometimes it's withdrawn altogether, trying to exhaust or tire out the protesters. Other times it's returned with live fire. Other times it's returned trying to fire rubber bullets into people's eyes or private parts. This is a brutal regime that is not afraid to crack down, but is also afraid of provoking the crowds even more. And make no mistake, there are lots of cities on social media right now that look like they have fallen entirely. Small towns, villages, cities that look like they've fallen entirely to the population. Will the regime return with a vengeance? That remains to be seen. But one major X factor here is security force cohesion and loyalty, particularly over the next 72 hours. After that, of course, is the resolve of the street after the violence to continue to contest the regime. And I have to tell you, after the near day and a half information blackout due to the cutting of the internet, the fact that in dribs and drabs we continue to get images, we continue to get videos of protesters bravely contesting this regime means that Iranian protester resolve, despite the crackdown, despite the violence, remains high.
All right, so in wrapping up, of course, we're going to take a look at what to watch for here in the coming days. I mean, this is happening fast. There have been some reports that the protesters may only be able to hold out for another 2 or 3 days at most. I'm not sure what that is being based on, other than just saying the morale of the protesters. But when you look at the morale, we're seeing the casualty counts rise and the protests continue. So it's hard from the information that I'm seeing and the videos that I'm seeing to notice any sort of significant crack in the determination of the Iranian people. In fact, just yesterday, we had a clip of some Iranians saying, this is it. It's all or nothing. This is the time we have to take down the regime. So I think a big indicator here are going to be these pro-regime protests set for tomorrow in Tehran. The regime continues to promote this. How many people are going to show up and actually stand alongside the regime that is now murdering their own people in the streets and stand against their citizens, their neighbors, their brothers, sisters, mothers, daughters, friends that they live beside? What does that look like after another night of Iranian regime forces murdering their civilians? Of course, we have to see if President Trump actually makes a decision here and what that decision might be in terms of U.S. intervention. The most recent I saw is that he's planning to make a decision on Tuesday. Again, if these protesters only have a couple days left of holding out and the U.S. decision is made on Tuesday, that might not be enough, to be blunt. So we'll see. I wouldn't be shocked if that's a bit of a feint, suggesting that we're going to wait a few more days before we actually do anything. In between now and Tuesday, there is some sort of significant U.S. response. That could be a cyber attack to take down the comms of some of these regime organizations. It could be sanctions. It could be sanctions isn't a good way to look at this. Something like seizing a ship, more immediate, could be in the cards here in the next couple days. And then, last but not least, again tying into what Nadav Ayal said there, who's going to step up and take charge? Who is the unifying figure here? Who is the group that could actually stand in should the regime collapse at any point in the near future? Those three things are going to be worth watching here in the coming days. But that's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.